So let's talk about the word intentionality when it comes to money mindset. That's what I've been thinking about this week. And I've been fascinated with what has come up for me. And I really am excited to share it with. Okay, so I'm going to start with this because this is actually, let me see if I can make this bigger. Okay. Because as much as this is going to sound weird, this entire thought process started when I was on the toilet. And I've given you a nice picture of a toilet to ease ourselves into this conversation. But bear with me for a second. As I was on the toilet, it struck me that I usually rush through sitting on the loo. Like I'm just like, I have better things to do, gotta get out here, gotta do that. So I'm kind of in a frantic state and I know I've got stuff to do. And I've noticed that I do that a lot because I've got a lot to get through and a lot of priorities and I have OCD, so I want to get everything done. And then I started thinking about intentionality and the person that I am becoming, want to be, want to continue to adhere to, which is a billionaire, because we've crossed the millionaire mark several times over. How would they behave? They would behave with the utmost amount of intention and intentionality. And I'm sharing this because I've been privileged for the last 3 months to work in very close proximity with someone who is a billionaire. And I've been watching him and I've been learning. And I've got to say, it is low key changing a lot of how I operate. So I want to take you through a bit of a journey here, and it's the psychology of intentional wealth and how conscious choice creates financial abundance. But let's get rid of all the jargon and just break it down to one thing, one word: intentionality. Because I want you to never see this word the same again. Because what separates those who stumble through financial life from those who systematically build wealth is this one word. It's not luck, although that plays a small part. It's not even intelligence. It's not starting capital or if you come from a wealthy family. The defining characteristic of success is the conscious, deliberate application of choice across every dimension of wealth creation. And let's talk about the neuroscience. Our brains are prediction machines, constantly forecasting outcomes based on patterns. But here's what neuroscience is revealing: the brain treats intentional actions very different from automatic ones. So, if you sit there and someone says, "Oh, you're ugly," there will come an automatic thought, and you can also have an intentional one. Your automatic thought comes from your belief system. If somewhere in your growing up you believed you were ugly, it's automatically going to trigger that. That's why we use the word triggered so much. And you're going to say, or you're going to lash out at this person, or you're going to be really aggressive with them, or you're going to abuse them back. But it's going to come from a place of automatic response or reaction. Let me choose my words carefully: automatic reaction rather than a measured response. But if you train yourself, you could then sit and think, oh, I feel a little bit hurt by that. Why is that? Because I have a belief system that was somehow in my childhood planted that I am ugly. And now I'm going to react from that place. But I've done enough work on myself to know that I'm not ugly. So, therefore, how do I want to respond? And then you can have an intentional response. What I've talked you through there is something I've actually been through myself. Not the ugly part, but you get what I'm saying. I'm just using a random example. Um, and as I've taught myself to have this pause, this gap, this delay, I'm now beginning to connect the fact that what I'm doing is I'm living intentionally as opposed to from a reactional place of working. And that has changed a lot of how my day goes, how I feel, how I show up, and in turn, how much I achieve. And because I believe and trust myself more, I actually see more money coming into my life. Over the last, I'm going to say 2 years, I have had just unexplainable things, inexplicable things happen from a financial point of view. And I'm like, how is this even happening? But it starts with intentionality in certain areas. So, Dr. Michael Gazzaniga's research on the brain's interpretive function shows that when we act with clear intention, our neural networks literally rewire to support that goal. So the brain starts to filter information, it starts to notice opportunities, it starts to make connections that align with this conscious objective that you've made. That is why it is so important when I teach people, when I coach people, I always say to them, let's start by understanding your goal. Write it down and be clear. 99% of them do not know what their goal is. You'll hear things like, I want to be financially independent. I want to be financially free. I don't want to worry about money. Okay, but what does that mean in the actual day to day? What does that look like in terms of a number on a sheet of paper? So let's talk a little bit about, I'm going to move over to the next slide here. So hopefully we're getting this, that intentionality is the fact of being deliberate or purposive, but we don't always break that down to the little things, the quality of our mental state, our thoughts, our beliefs, our desires, our hopes, and then directing those. So I love this next slide because it asks a question that I think is so interesting. And if you honestly got the answer to this, well done. And drop it. There must be a comment section. I don't know where this is going. Maybe YouTube. Who knows? Maybe I'm just recording this and it'll never see the light of day. But if you get this right, drop it in the comment section. I'll ask you a simple question. There are 3 frogs on a log and one decides to jump off. How many frogs are left? I'm going to let you think about that one for a while. 3 frogs on a log. One decides to jump off. How many frogs are left? 2, right? Because one decided to jump off. Now, this is where intentionality comes in. Because the answer is actually, there are 3 frogs left on the log after one decided to jump off. The question is, what? Why? Because deciding to do something is not the same as actually doing it. The frog made a decision, but the action of jumping was never completed. So all 3 frogs actually remain on the log until such point as we are told that there are 3 frogs on a log and one jumped off. Not just decided to jump off, but jumped off. Now, yeah, semantics, yada, yada, yada. But I think it goes a long way in actually showing and demonstrating what I'm talking about. And when you understand it, you really understand that there are dimensions to thoughts. And my intention here is to really grab you by the short and curlies and get you to reappraise what you've thought about how wealth is created in your mind first, before you learn about investing, before you learn about 401ks, TFSAs, all of these things, RAs, before you figure out how to invest. So money is about making it, protecting it, building it, and then, preserving it for future generations, so on and so forth. We get that. But I think one thing we miss is the foundational element from which all of these things spring. So let's talk about 3 dimensions of financial intentionality. I have analyzed hundreds of wealth creation stories just because I used to do it as for fun, because I was just fascinated. I've read so many books. And I'm also really lucky that I have, in my career, been very close in terms of mentorship and working directly with at least 4 billionaires, like people who've created, Chris Kirubi, who's created great amounts of wealth. The gentleman I'm working with right now, who is in the construction and mining industry and building massive wealth. I mean, this guy literally owns like half of a country. I've worked with titans of industry in the oil industry. But all of this is to show you that a lot of what I'm going to tell you is stuff I've seen and experienced. And it's stuff that I've seen myself do, but without knowing that I'm doing it. So listen carefully. There are 3 dimensions of financial intentionality, because successful people aren't random in their approach. They might not even consciously know that they're not random in their approach, but they are strategically intentional in at least one of these 3 dimensions. Let's start with the first. The first is and this is going to make you feel good because it's not a one size fits all. Personally, I absolutely loathe information, advice that just is cookie cutter, like we're all supposed to be the same. So this is very, very different from one person to another. So you might see yourself show up in one of these, and that's perfectly okay. The first thing we hear all the time, is that you need to network to be rich or to be famous. But there are plenty of examples in history of people who didn't network and were quite famous and quite rich. So what's going on there? So let's start with the first one, intentionality in partnership. Intentionality in partnership is simply that some individuals understand that wealth is rarely a solo journey. How do I escape from here so we can have some fun with these slides? Right? So wealth is rarely a solo journey. And these people are good at naturally connecting with people. They are good at what most people hate, networking. These people seem to like network naturally. Like they don't even worry about going out and meeting people and selling themselves. It just seems to come naturally. Right? An example here is Sarah Blakely, who founded Spanx. Her intentionality wasn't primarily about the product itself, but if you read her story, she built a lot of strategic relationships. She sought out mentors who had built consumer brands. She intentionally networked with retail buyers and connected with other female entrepreneurs who understood her unique challenges. So the framework here is that partnership intentionality operates through what psychologists call social capital theory. This is why you'll see a lot of people who make money later in life. They make it from like their friends they went to high school with and stuff like that, people that they've built networks with through life and trust them. And then as they get older, these people are in high powered places and positions, and it forms kind of like a boys club at times. And people hate that, but it's just a natural way in which we work as human beings when we create like social networks and social capital, right? So in a very very real sense, these people ask themselves, who has solved the problems that I'm facing, whose skills can complement my weaknesses, and which relationships create compound value over time. Yesterday I met with a woman just like that. She called me up. She didn't want anything. She just wanted to pick my brain, share her idea with me, see if I had any advice for her. She didn't ask me for nothing. And I was like, you're a natural born like networker, because she led with value. She wanted to give me something of value, and we just had a great conversation and we left it at that. There was no like, okay, now can you give me business? So if you are not the person who can be intentional in partnership, don't worry, I got you. There's other ways that you can create intentionality when it comes to financial intentionality and financial wealth. So the second one is, and I think I see myself in this one, right? New slide. It's intentionality in creation. Now, someone once asked me what I wanted to do. I was at a juncture in my life. My business was working fine, and I had managers for all the markets. We're in about 6 African markets with my digital marketing advertising agency, Blue Flamingo, and there was a manager for each market. So in essence, I was actually redundant in the company. Like it was running fine without me. And they were like, okay, what do you want to do next? And then I went into this whole spiel about I love the process of creation. I love to build something and see it come to life. And after saying that, I just thought to myself, for somebody who says that they're a good communicator, sometimes you talk rubbish. Like, what were you saying right there? Okay, that was me obviously judging myself negatively. I've since forgiven myself and I speak better and kinder to myself now. But in that process, and when I was doing this research and reading, I realized that's who I am. My type of intentionality is in creation. And this might be you. You might belong to the group of people who channel their intentionality into what they create. So they're not just responding to market demands. These people are people who create things for the sake of creating them because they're good, because they're beautiful. So they're not the people you go to and say, "Do you know what your what's that Stanford term? Your TAM and your SAM." These are terms I learned when I was doing my MBA, your total addressable market, right? And your something like that. So they kind of don't really care about the market because they're shaping solutions that align with like a deeper purpose and a deeper vision. And this connects to what psychologist Mihaly calls autotelic behavior. I am going to try and type that for you here. Autotelic behavior. So what does that mean? Autotelic behavior. In essence, it simply means a sort of intrinsic form of motivation. Creators are intentional about what they build, and when they do that, they tap into flow states. And I like to link that spiritually to God giving you a gift and you tapping into that gift and bringing it down. Like, have you ever watched a dancer or someone who's just so insanely talented that you feel like you are seeing God in what they are doing? And when they tap into that flow and they are intentional, it leads to higher quality output and sustained motivation. Nobody had to get me to come in front of you today and share this stuff. Since I was 5 years old, I have loved sharing information. I live for the English language. I love how words sound. I love sharing ideas. When I was on radio, I loved it when people would call in and we'd have debates. I always used to debate my father. Every relationship I've been in, I always debate with my partner. Like, if I can't have a conversation with you, I don't really know how to connect with you. And for me, that's what makes it easy for me to tap into that flow state where I'm motivated to create. And for you, if that's you, it means that financially you can create abundance by understanding that the dimensions of financial intentionality, yours is in creation. So, good example is you've cleaned a floor, perhaps used a vacuum before. You've heard of James Dyson. He spent 15 years and created 51,126 prototypes of his vacuum cleaner before he launched a revolutionary version. So his intentionality wasn't about the quick profits. It was about solving a specific problem in a way that aligned with his engineering values and his vision of how products should work. So the framework here is guided. I love Viktor Frankl. You've probably read his book. If you have not read Viktor Frankl, I will see if I can show you. It's Man's Search for Meaning. Great book. Really, really good book. And it really kind of talks a lot around the intentionality of creation, if you ask me. So let's see if I can bring this in here. There we go. Move that to the side. Okay. So Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And with that, these individuals are asking, what problem am I uniquely positioned to solve? And I find myself asking this, like, why me? Why would I be the person in front of anybody or speaking? And I realized that I love communication, but I am that unique person who, it's going to sound funny, but from a young age, I've also always loved money. I started my first business when I was 6 years old. I got my neighbor's guavas, I sold them on the streets, and I gave him some of the profits. But I've always loved money. And I never put it together that what I like to do is communicate what I'm learning about money, how it's made, and all of that. At the same time, making it, because, you don't go to a nail technician who's got lousy nails, right? You got to actually do this stuff. And I realized that I can create value and I can create money, but what I really love is talking about these concepts. And I really love psychology and philosophy and all of that. So it's what makes me uniquely positioned to do this. I've made money. I can speak. It's a passion. And I as a strategist, which is my day job, I'm able to put abstract concepts together and simplify them. Bam. Here's the second deep question if you're a creator. How does this creation reflect my deepest values? And that's important to ask because your values might be a job well done. Your values might be creation itself. Your values might be teaching, communicating, connecting with others. You need to figure out how what you're doing reflects with your deepest value. And then what legacy are you building through what you make? You know what I love about what I do is that I have these same conversations with my children. And my children are my legacy. So I don't care if nobody watches this or nobody finds value from this. The mere fact that I can refine my thoughts, I'm so privileged to spend my time researching and reading on these concepts and teaching them to my children. I know that if I die, what I've put between their ears is so powerful that they will never lack. They will have an abundance mindset through life. They will understand the secrets of the universe and they will understand how to take care of themselves. Okay, so that's number two. Slides, where are we at? So intentionality in creation. Remember we talked about, what was this now? I think this was intent. The first one was what? Do you guys remember? Okay. Problem is I'm talking from my mind now. Anyway, it was intentionality in, I'm going to say it was in partnership, looking at these notes. Okay. So some people are better at networking. Don't cry if that's not you. Doesn't matter. Other people are more interested in the creation. So there's, I I have what do you call it? OCD. So bear with me here. Intentionality in creation. So now we get to the third one. Whoop. Okay. So I've talked about intentionality in partnership. We talked about intentionality in creation. We now get to the third one. Let's chat about this one because I love this one. And this one is intentionality in method. Something that I got to be honest with you guys, not me. And it's embarrassing to say, well, because when I break this one down for you, you'll be like, what? That's not you. Yeah, I hire people to do this because need me. Good to know your weaknesses. Let's talk about intentionality and method. These are the process masters. Okay? They focus their intentionality on how they approach wealth building. They're not necessarily the most creative or the best networkers, but they are masterful at designing and executing systems. Get this? All right. I'm going to see if I can find a picture here because you're going to say, well, Shanice, give us an example of somebody who is like that. Bam! Got it? Warren Buffett. And I bet you just went, yeah, yeah. Guy lives in the same old house, not flashy. He's not seen at corporate events. He's not a Richard Branson. He's not out there shaking it, right? But boy, did he design and execute a hell of a system. Is it tracking for you now? Because when you see it, you can't unsee it. So, the psychology here, this aligns with research on what we call implementation intentions by psychologist Peter Gollwitzer. When people are specific about their methods, the if then scenarios of wealth building, they're far more likely to follow through consistently. So, Warren Buffett, great example. His intention isn't primarily about what companies to buy or whom to partner with, but it's really people are really impressed by him because of how he evaluates investments. So, he has a systemic approach to analyzing businesses. His disciplined timing and his methodical reinvestment strategy have been more important than any individual stock pick, and you see this in all his books. So the framework is method intentionality is rooted in what behavioral economists call process over outcome thinking. I have gotten better at this, to be fair, because I've had to teach myself this as my business scaled, which means not just creativity and, oh, this is going to be fun, we can create something, but what systems can consistently generate results? How do I get leads? How do I do a landing page? How do I put ads out that are good? How do I convert people? How do I bring them in? And how do I have the right team to execute on the job? How do I remove, and this one is a big one, hang on to your hats. How can I remove emotion from financial decisions? And which processes scale without losing effectiveness? These are big ones. Okay. So if you see yourself in one of those three, you'll likely fall in one of those three frameworks. And what I love about this is that you don't have to worry if you're not a good networker. Perhaps you're a creative. Maybe you're just about great processes. It's like I always say, hire your weaknesses. Understanding yourself is the first key to really winning because there's nothing wrong with you. You're just using someone else's framework to try and build wealth. That's why it feels like an uphill struggle. But once you understand your strong points, you can build from that point of view and surround yourself with the skill sets to be better at the others if they're important, or to bring in people who are good at that to partner with you because you understand your strengths and you can outsource your weaknesses. So here's where it gets interesting. Successful individuals often shift, and I think you might have heard me say that I'm getting a little bit more into number three here, which is the process master. I've become better at it because I have done a lot of work and a lot of studying around it. So what we have is that it's flexible, right? Um, Essentially, intentionality can change. The entrepreneur who starts by being intentional about partnerships can later become intensely focused on refining the creative process. The method focused investor might recognize the need to be more intentional about team building. And that's the beauty of life. We're constantly expanding. In fact, I said to someone once, to my son, and he regurgitated it to me, that the meaning of life is joyful expansion. It's that you expand with joy, it's that you keep learning new things and you keep growing, because when you stop growing, you die. So this flexibility requires a meta level of intentionality. Boom. I love this word meta. Let's talk about this one. What is meta? Whoa, not Facebook, not the Facebook company. Meta, for me, I'm going to simplify it for you here, is to think about what you think about. And I think I just love it. It's such a great concept. And I started this session with you today by actually explaining a meta thought I was having. I was on the toilet and I was thinking about what I was thinking about. So if you say, I hate that person, and then you think, why did I say I hate that person? Now you are in meta. Okay. So essentially, basically, the flexible intentionality, the ability to move from one of those three types of intentionalities that I just described, requires you to think about your thoughts, requires you, and that's what I'm doing for you now. You've watched this video, you have completely taken yourself to a different level of awareness. Now you can be intentional about knowing what kind of intentionality am I practicing now? Which method am I in now? Am I being creative? Am I socializing and networking? Or am I looking at processes and systems? And then once you can do that, you can now start to interrogate, where do I need to do better? Yeah, we're almost done. If you've listened this long, you deserve like a trophy. And the trophy is going to be in the fact that you can't unsee this stuff once you've seen it. And your life is going to be immeasurably better if you stick with continuously improving yourself and learning. Because awareness is the first step to improving your circumstances. It's just being aware of what you want to improve and finding the tools that will help you improve. Cool. So now we have to talk about what I call the shadow side. I'm going to type this in here. Because every coin has got its other side. And this intentionality is no different. So intentionality, boom, boom, has a shadow side. What? What do you mean? Okay, no, I'm just being silly. What I mean by this is that psychological research reveals that intentionality can also become counterproductive if it becomes rigid or anxiety driven. This is a big one for me because we have way too many people trying to tell you what to do and how to do it based on their internal needs or what's worked for them. I don't hear enough people saying, you need to see if this resonates with you. So they give you and this is what I'm very intentional about, is I'm not telling you what to do. I'm simply opening up avenues for you to listen to this stuff and decide for yourself if it makes sense and decide for you what you align with, what resonates. You must always be critical in your thinking and discerning as to whether something applies to you or not. Never just take stuff wholesale. So the shadow side of intentionality is that intentionality can become a trap because what happens is people say, oh, if you wake up in the morning and the first thing you do is grab your phone, you are off to a bad start for your day, right? And all of you must take ice cold, what are those things called? Ice cold showers or baths or whatever those things are that everyone was doing at some point. Everybody has got to have a morning routine. The best thing to do is go to bed at 9. Geez, I mean, there's so many rules out there. Is it not? It's not surprising that we're all just sort of anxious all the time and wondering if we're doing things right. And so it's really important that even in this area, you are intentional about exercising critical thought. For example, it has been proven that those ice baths that are so popular are actually not good for women because women have a totally different metabolic system from men. Now, don't quote me on this. I will promise you I'll pull up some research somewhere and put it in the comment section. But you have to be critical and you have to listen to yourself because it makes sense. I mean, all the people dumping themselves into tons of ice were primarily men and primarily athletes who could manage. I think it was Wim Hof or something like that who popularized this whole ice. It's a guy. Like, it's a guy who popularized it. I mean, I go into toilets that don't have places for me to hang my handbag. And I immediately know this toilet was designed by a man because what am I supposed to do with my handbag? Put it on the floor with all the germs? I totally digress. But you get what I'm saying. Like, you have to be critical. and think about these things before you just swallow them wholesale. Even what I'm saying included. Do your homework, see how it feels for you, try it out. I have only been able to, after, I mean, my whole life has been a big study of just how to hack my life and make it better. But it's only in the last, I would say, 5 years that I have become super intentional about trying things out for myself. I don't take anything wholesale. I'm Sometimes I'm a morning person, sometimes I'm not a morning person. Over time, I've realized I am more or less a morning person. So it depends on you knowing yourself. But I digress. Let's get back into the shadow side stuff because it's also very interesting. Okay. So here, what you want to do is be that person who practices what I call healthy intentionality. This stems from what psychologist Edward Deci calls autonomous motivation. And you will see it even with children. Tell your child to do something he is not interested in, and oh my God, it's an uphill struggle. Have him do something he loves. I encourage my son loves anime, loves it. My son is now learning Japanese, but failing Zulu. Because Zulu doesn't mean anything to him. He doesn't care. But Japanese, he can do all the manga stuff and he can get into it and he can chat with his friends and he's passionate about it. Do I care? I don't. He can fail Zulu as much as he wants, as long as I know that language is lighting up a part of his neural activity and it's keeping him smart and engaged. It's not what I want necessarily. And yes, maybe he'll fail school, but I'm not teaching him to get into the normal system anyway. That's a story for another day. I'm not saying education doesn't matter. All I'm saying is I want him to do stuff that aligns with this concept, this idea of autonomous motivation, motivation that comes from inside, choices that are made from genuine interest and personal values. You know why? Because that creates sustainable action. You can get up every single day to work and you're energized instead of drained, and you can keep it up. Isn't that one of the things they say about social media, that you got to be consistent with your posting? You know what's hard? Posting about shit you don't care about. I care about this stuff. You don't need to pay me to talk about money. I love money and I love talking and I love reading and researching. Not everybody does. But I also love making money, which is why I own a business, which is why I own real estate, which is why I invest, which is why I put money in other companies, because I just love the idea of creation and being able to create things. So all of those three things, when put together, means I can give of myself from a passionate place. Because right now everyone's out having a great time. It's a Saturday morning and I'm busy doing this because this is fun for me. So you have to have healthy intentionality. Unhealthy intentionality, on the other hand, comes from something that we call, new slide, controlled motivation. So remember, we said that healthy, if you're healthy in your intentionality, it's coming from inside. It's autonomous, right? Meaning you have control over it. It's yours. It doesn't belong to anybody outside of you. You are motivated from the outside in. Apparently, I can't spell. Okay, so we're talking autonomous motivation. We talked about that, and it's coming from your choices. But now, unhealthy intentionality comes from what we call controlled motivation. What drives controlled motivation? Fear. And there's a really good one here. The other day I saw a meme and a guy was saying he doesn't suffer from FOMO. What he suffers from is phobia. And I was like, what's phobia? He was like, oh, I don't have FOMO. What I have is fear of being included. I just want to stay at home and eat chips. So please don't invite me. Okay, anyway, seriously, FOMO, fear of missing out. So essentially, when you are struggling to think, oh, I was supposed to jog today, I didn't jog today, all these externally driven fear, ego, pressure, that's why people get burnt out. They make poor decisions and they get into businesses that are unsustainable. It just feels like the business is just too much. Here's the key distinction: healthy intentionality feels expansive, it feels energizing. So when you feel that, your intentionality is in the right place. Unhealthy intentionality, however, is constricting and draining. So you want to cultivate your intentional edge, right? All right, let's wrap this up with a bow and bring it home. Congratulations if you've stayed this long, because I'm going to look at the time, we are 34 minutes deep. But I am not doing this for people who are not interested in depth. So again, intentionality. If you're with me, well done. If you're not, well, it wasn't for you anyway. Okie dokes. So we're going to wrap this up because it's all well and good to talk about all this stuff, but you're probably thinking, well, then what next? How do I cultivate this intentional edge you speak of? So let's do that. To develop an intentional approach to money and wealth building, I'm going to give you things I've tried that have worked, but again, remember, you must try this for yourself and see what resonates. I'm going to give you some examples I've seen from people I've worked with who have made millions and billions, and I'll give you a few that I've researched and read through many, many books. Okay, so some evidence based strategies. All right, so we're going to start with, I wrote these down so we can not spend too much time here. The first thing we're going to start with is the intentionality audit. Regularly examine where your current focus lies. Are you being intentional about partnerships, creation, or method? Now, the problem is most of us scatter our attention across all three, and then what happens? I'm going to bold this. We master none. Can you even see this? I don't know if you can see this. We end up mastering none. So choose your primary dimension based on your natural strengths, but this is also important, your current life stage. Remember, I talked to you about the fact that when I started my business, I had to be focused on like partnerships, bringing in the right people because the business is new. But as the business grows, you have a little bit more leeway to create. And as you start to scale, you have to actually put in methods. So evaluating your life stage is also critical. I'm sure that makes sense. You're not watching this if you're not smart. That much I know. Okay. Number two, what else can you do in terms of creating intentionality around your finances and your money that will really, really help you move the needle? It's the weekly design session. Schedule weekly 30-minute sessions to consciously design your upcoming financial decisions. I'm not talking about goal setting, people. I'm talking about process design. You have to ask yourself a couple of critical questions. You can pause the video, go back if this is going by too fast, just to get these done. You want to ask yourself, how do I want to approach money decisions this week? Just ask. Because people don't do this stuff because they think, well, I don't know the answers. But that's why we ask. Again, the intentionality of asking means that your brain is forced to give you an answer. It doesn't matter if you don't think you know the answer at that point. The moment you write it down and ask, something will trigger. Because your prefrontal cortex will come online and it will prime your brain for intentional action. For example, when I ask myself on a Sunday, how do I want to approach money decisions this week? I go like, this week, I need to invest in seeing a few more people. So I'm going to put aside some money to take people out for lunch. When I take them out for lunch, it's intentional. I know I'm spending money on them. It's not by chance. And I utilize that time well. So you've got to get into the habit of, if you want to, like if you don't have to do this stuff if you don't want to. I mean, more power to you. But if you're really curious about how do I become better, you kind of have to design your money week. I mean, I know whether or not I'm going to buy groceries next week. I don't just rock up and buy groceries, not because I'm counting every penny, but because I like to be intentional about it and I like to know. So at times I'm like, we've eaten too many bananas this week. To next week we're gonna eat. Now it might sound like that's a lot of thinking, but I'll get into another video around how we can really maximize our decision making abilities. But that's a video for another day. Okay, the values and money alignment check. I love this one. This is totally one of my favorites because you need to examine whether your financial behavior is aligning with your deepest values. What do I mean by this? If you're misaligned, you're going to create something called cognitive dissonance, which undermines any actions you can take over time. Because when your money moves match your values, intentionality is effortless. So one of my values is authenticity, and the other value of mine is growth. I always want to be authentic and as much as I can. Remember, this is something I'm shooting for. I'm not always authentic. That's the whole point. It's a target that I'm trying to catch. Probably catch it when I'm dead, but at least it keeps life interesting and exciting. My second value is growth. I always want to grow. So if I'm not spending my money on these things, and a big part of my growth is how do I grow with my family, my loved ones. So for me, I've decided that a good day for me is a day when I do three things. A day when I create, because that's my most authentic self. A day where I learn, and a day where I spend time with family. And that's it. And that's how I have a good day. So I need to check whether how I'm spending my money is aligning with these things. Because if I'm spending money in other areas, I'm going to have that anxiety, that stress in me that I'm not spending money in the areas I should be spending my money in. Okay, so that's how you become super, super intentional when it comes to money. And then this one is my favorite because I am that person who, if life isn't fun, what even is the point? I do not want to live my whole life trying to remember rules 1 to 4 all the time and trying to think, am I adhering to these rules? Because, and this is what I tell people, you are smarter and more capable than you think if you just give yourself a chance. Treat everything as an experiment. Be intentional about testing new approaches. So this one didn't work. So what? Measure those results and iterate. Don't allow, again, intentionality to become dogma, right? I have to get it right at all costs in this way. You've got to be a little bit flexible with it. And I understand the irony of me saying, you've got to. And then I'm like, be flexible. But I'm sure you get what I'm saying. It's this idea of don't worry too much about getting it wrong. At some point, you've got to trust yourself. As long as you have these ideas in your mind and you're aware of them, it's very, very interesting that that intention itself to have fun, that's also an intention you want to set. To have fun, to enjoy the process, to learn is going to free you of anxiety and of perfectionism and trying to get everything right. Okay? So I will leave you with this last thought. What makes intentionality purposeful and powerful in wealth building is not just one decision, it's the compound effect of conscious choices over time. So each action builds neural pathways that make the next one easier, and so on and so forth. So the most successful people aren't those who never make mistakes. We've talked about this. It's those who make conscious choices consistently. So your financial future isn't determined by the economy. I want you to understand this because I have a whole video coming on this. I always tell people make money when the economy is down. What are they different? Do they have two heads? So your financial future isn't determined by the economy, your background, or market conditions. It's determined by the quality and consistency of your conscious choices. Now, the question isn't whether you're going to make financial decisions. You're going to make thousands of those. The question is whether those decisions are going to come from a conscious place. They're going to be intentional. Are they going to be aligned with your deepest values and wisdom? Because in a world of financial noise and distraction, intentionality isn't just an advantage. I promise you, it is your competitive edge. Now, once a month, I do a thing where I sit and chat money mindsets in a really powerful workshop where I shift people's beliefs and mindsets. And I do this not because I need the money or necessarily want this to be like a business for me. I do it because I get so much joy from seeing people's entire mindsets shift with just some simple key concepts that change the way they show up and the way they operate. So if you're interested, I will put a link in the chat for the next one. I'm not sure when the next one's going to be, but it'll be great. And with that, we are more or less done. The last slide is somewhere over here, and it's just a recap of the intentionality model. So I want you to just remember, if you forget everything else I've told you today, what you truly believe, which is your philosophy, whether your philosophy is money takes a long time to make, money is hard to make, will impact your choices and your attitudes. If your choices and attitudes are great and they are intentional, you will see success, meaning that you are meta, you are thinking about what you are thinking about and being deliberate. If your choices and attitudes are accidental, meaning they are moment by moment choices that are easy to do as not to do, and human nature is drawn towards complacity and default, by the way. So if most of your actions are accidental, oh, I woke up, I feel tired, I'm just going to lay here, or whatever, like you're not really making these intentional choices, there will come a point where you need to take ownership. And if you take ownership, you can now start to move towards success because now you're moving towards intentionality. But if you don't take ownership, this is where failure comes from. All of this to say, it is totally 100% within your control. It's not the government, it's not the economy, it's none of those things. It's simply your belief systems. And so we go back to that great word that I use all the time. Really, intentionality is about the quality of your thoughts, beliefs, desires, and hopes, which will then implement or be implemented and seen in your actions. Really hope that was something you can enjoy, learn from, take away. And I will see you next time. And next time I do a 1 hour video. But I hope it was actually quite exhausting for me doing this. I'm surprised. Like I enjoyed it, but It was not easy. Like it takes a lot out of you. I can feel my lymph nodes at the back here. Anyway, till next time. My name is Shanice, and I wish you an absolutely financially abundant time.